What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and welcome to week 2 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2024 CFL season and postseason. And we're coming off of a week 1 that certainly could have been better. Was better than week 1 last year, where I went 3-9, so we seem to be maybe trending in the right direction. And if we extrapolate across the whole season, I'll be about 15 to 17% better this year, so 2 thumbs up on that. Week 1, I only pulled in a 5-7 record. Again, nothing to write home about. It's not the basic disaster that week 1 was last year. I'm not asking for a do-over. I kind of got on a couple of things, so, it is what it is. It's gonna be a tough week when you only go 1-3 straight up. I didn't call Montreal beating Winnipeg, and I still feel confident about my read on the league coming in, but we just had some, outstanding performances in week 1 that I wasn't expecting, and one of them, and it's the reason I'm wearing this shirt, I don't think anybody expected that out of the Argos in week 1. I think Argos fans didn't even expect that out of the Argos in week 1. Enjoy this, by the way. The natural light in this video is going to be going nuts because I use natural light for these whenever I can, and there's a lot of rolling clouds today. So you're going to see this go dark and come up and go dark and come up. It's kind of like my results. So yeah, 1-3 straight up. Even money on the betting picks, 2-2 against the spread and 2-2 on the over-under. Started the season relatively comfortably as well in CFL fantasy. Brought in 96.9 points in week 1. Actually got a late week stat adjustment there, which knocked me up a little bit. A 1,933 overall across the entire game. And just outside the top 200 in the league that I'm in, which once again this year is Derek Taylor's league. I believe for the second year in a row, it's the biggest league across all of CFL fantasy. So if you look at the league's list, it should be right there at the top. It's a DT on OB, I believe it is. So I'm just outside the top 200 in that league. My most outstanding player from week 1, definitely Trevor Harris, quarterback for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. He put up a 20-point week, and because he was my team captain, cha-ching, we double that number. He brought in 40 of my 96.9 points last week, so he was a big contributor. Got nothing out of the defensive spot, unfortunately, but decent role contributions across the lineup. It was not a bad week. Now, unfortunately, you're not going to have my roster for week 2 in the actual video itself because shame, shame, shame. The Game Zone CFL fantasy people haven't reset the teams yet. So I don't have the option to set my lineup. I don't see anybody's prices yet for this week. That lineup will be down in the pinned comment as soon as I'm able to make it. So with all that said, our week 2 slate of games looks like this. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers are going to travel to Ottawa, take on a REDBLACKS team that got the week 1 bye. It's the first time in 2 years, I believe, that bye didn't go to the Argos. We got the Montreal Alouettes on the tail end of back-to-back road games, traveling to Edmonton to take on the Elks. We have the Calgary Stampeders traveling to BC to take on, again, a Lions team that was certainly not expecting to lose in week 1. And we got the Saskatchewan Roughriders also on the tail end of back-to-back road games in Hamilton, taking on the Ticats. The Argos get the bye. And honestly, if I'm the Argos, I'm not happy about the fact I'm going on the bye this week. After a performance like that, the last thing I want to do is sit down for a week. If it's possible to carry momentum game to game, I would have been salivating for another game here in week 2 to try to keep that rolling as long as I could. Unfortunately, they've got the bye. Let's start with that Bombers REDBLACKS game. And in Winnipeg, look, this is a stacked offensive roster. Even with the pieces that they lost, and we talked about those in last week's episode, even with the pieces they lost, this is still a stacked offensive roster. And for a stacked offensive roster, the fact that there was only 1 touchdown scored would be bad enough. The fact that that touchdown came from Johnny Augustine, and no disrespect to Johnny Augustine, but when you look at the gunslingers that are on that offense, the fact that Johnny Augustine was the one that scored the only touchdown, not good news for Winnipeg, and it wasn't. Obviously, they came up with a bit of a dud here in week 1. It bordered on a disaster on the offensive side, unfortunately. Collaros was suffocated all game long, 61% on his passes, only 209 passing yards, no passing touchdowns, and he did throw a pick, and an Al's defense that only allowed the Bombers to generate 301 yards of total offense. The Bombers simply could not get the plays that they needed to generate long scoring drives. They were only 8 for 23 on second down to go along with 3 giveaways and 3 total fumbles. They lost 2 of those 3 fumbles. And now they have to figure out the offense without Kenny Lawler. He's on the 6-game injured list. It's an arm injury. There was a report that it was a fracture, but I don't know that that's been confirmed yet. In any case, Kenny Lawler's on the 6-game list. They're going to have to figure this out without one of their biggest weapons. Since Ottawa's coming into this game off the bye, I figured I would give them the one burning question treatment that I gave the teams in week 1. And in terms of my one burning question, when it comes specifically to the Red Blacks, who's this team's quarterback? So if you look at this roster, so Jeremiah Masoli is practicing. I think he's dealing with an illness, but he is practicing. Drew Brown didn't come over to this team for nothing. Dustin Crum is still there. Tyree Adams is still there. Like, this is starting to feel like an episode of Too Many Cooks. Like, who are the quarterbacks for this team? And I understand that it's convention in the CFL to carry an extra quarterback, maybe sometimes 2, but you're looking at 4 guys who could arguably be either number 1s or number 2s. So who's the 3 and who's the 4 and how is this whole thing going to play out? Who is the starting quarterback for Ottawa? And depending on the answer to that question, it puts a cap on the offensive upside of this Red Blacks team. Is peg by 50 unfair here? Obviously, the fact that it's the season opener and the home opener for the Red Blacks does give them the rest advantage, but Kalaros and co are going to come into this game pissed off. You can't have a team that's as good as Winnipeg have a performance like that in week 1 and have them not come into their week 2 game going, let's take these guys' heads off. Unfortunately, Ottawa's just kind of the team that's in the way there, and I kind of get the feeling they might be heading towards getting their heads taken off. So obviously I'm on the Bombers here in this game in a big bad way. Let's take Winnipeg in Ottawa to get the win over the Red Blacks. On the line here, the Red Blacks are taking +7 as a very strong home dog. If I thought Ottawa had done enough to improve their defense in the offseason, maybe I might bite on this number. But again, Winnipeg is going to come into this game angry. I don't think 7 points is enough here. This could very easily, in my mind anyway, have been like a double-digit underdog spread in a home opener. And yes, that sounds disrespectful, but it is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Definitely laying the -7 points here on Winnipeg. Total in the game set at 46.5 points. I just don't think Ottawa's defense keeps this game under. Give me the over on the 46.5, and I'm going to go like a 37-17. I do think Ottawa scores some points here. They may come in garbage time when the game has already been decided, but give me a 37-17 final. Peg wins, Peg covers, over on the points. Let's go to Edmonton now, where the Elks are going to play host to the defending Grey Cup champion Montreal Alouettes. And look, this was the other side of that Winnipeg dud in week 1. A great showing on both sides of the football by the defending champs, showing they are the defending champs for a reason. That connection of Cody Fajardo to Tyson Philpott explodes and shines in week 1. They connected 10 times for 141 yards receiving and both of Cody Fajardo's passing touchdowns. The defense, as I just mentioned, 15 stops on critical second downs, cutting drives short, getting the ball back for the offense. And look, they generated 3 turnovers against a very disciplined, very well-coached, very good football, great football team. In fact, Montreal deserves all the credit in the world for doing that to a team like Winnipeg. If there is something to kind of keep an eye on here in terms of a concern, this Alouettes team does need to find their run game identity post William Stanback. So we're talking about a team that only ran for 73 yards on 23 carries. Now that did include a King Caleb Evans rushing touchdown, because of course it did, because he's kind of like that and he kind of does that. But I do believe in this combo that they have in the backfield of Walter Fletcher and Sean Thomas Erlington coming over from, I believe, the Ticats from last season. I believe in them as a combo. I believe in the upside of STE in the receiving game. Both of these backs in the receiving game, honestly, because Walter Fletcher is a great receiving running back. So they just need to find their identity here in the run game. I certainly don't think they're going to have any trouble doing that. Other than that, like, this looks like a championship caliber team. We move over to the Edmonton sideline, and stop me if this sounds familiar. I'm going to read this exactly as I wrote it down. Elks cough up a 10-point fourth quarter lead, allow a 3-touchdown fourth quarter, including the game winner with 70 seconds to go. Sunrise, sunset. And also, you knew if anybody was going to bring this up, it was going to be your boy. 101 yards in penalties on 11 penalties. No. Maybe it was aggressive to smack them. I'm sorry. They are kind of getting there. You can see it as a team that they're kind of moving in the right direction, are the Elks. They hung with a measurably better football team in Saskatchewan through, again, they're a better football team, and they had them through 3/4 of the game. They had them. They held the offense in check. The defense was playing well. The offense was putting up points. They had a 10-point lead going into the fourth quarter. This feels very reminiscent of a game these two teams played last year early in the season, where I think the Riders either won the game late or came up with a critical defensive stop late, one or the other. But this Elks team does not have a run game right now. Kevin Brown was really good last year. Really, really good last year. He came out with a bit of a dud here, and as a team, they only ran for 39 yards on 12 carries. That forced McLeod Bethel-Thompson, just returning to the league after a year in the USFL. He comes back, it forced him to have to do it all. Now, MBT was good in this game, 79% on his passes, 336 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. He did throw a pick, but they forced him to attempt 42 passes, including 25 in the second half. So just based on the second half, he was on pace to throw 50. So you can't put your quarterback that early in the season in a position where he's got to go out and attempt 42 passes to try and win the game, especially when you go into the fourth quarter with a 10-point lead. You gotta run the ball. You're at that point, you're against the clock. You're against the clock, the numbers on the scoreboard, not the team on the other side. Run the football. That, I'm assuming, will be the focus this week. The fact that this is road back-to-backs for the Alouettes doesn't really scare me. I don't have any reason at this point in the season, I don't have any reason to believe that these two teams are much different from 2023, at least not yet. So I think this is a game where the Alouettes roll. Now, in saying that, let me go back over here because there's something interesting here. Montreal is favored in this game by the exact same line on the road that BC was favored by last week. 5.5 points. And I got on that line last week because I thought 5.5 points, that feels like a gift. And I was happy to lay it. And what happens? BC doesn't even win that game, much less cover the spread. So I saw that number and I went, With Toronto, I can get it. With Edmonton, I can't. So I'm going to bite on this line again. And I'm going to lay the 5.5 points again on the road Alouettes. We'll see what happens. Total in this game set at 47.5 points, and I think if there's an under to be had this week, I feel like it's this one. Because again, look at what that Alouettes defense did last week to the Bombers, and what are they going to do to the Elks, which are two very different offenses in terms of ceiling and projections and all that stuff. I think I got to take the under here, but I think this is still going to be a competitive football game. Give me like a 26-17 for Montreal. It's a 2-possession win. It's comfortable. 26-17. Als win. Als cover the -5.5 and give me the under on the points. Our third matchup sees us travel to BC where the Calgary Stampeders are in town. And for as much as he may be maligned in certain circles that I'm also involved in, Jake Maier made a statement in week 1. I'm going to give that dude his flowers. 81%, 252 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. That is a heck of a statement for Jake Maier, who, like it or not, agree with it or not, has a reputation among people that really watch this league. And his reputation is he's not the safest with the football. Clean game in week 1. And the Stamps hold off a late rally from the Ticats to get the win in Bo Levi Mitchell's return to Calgary. And I find on this show, I don't often get the opportunity to credit specialists the way that I normally would, and especially as like the significant difference makers on the scoreboards. But look, Rene Paredes, man, he made 8 kicks in this game, 6 for 6 from field goals and a pair of extra points for 20 points. He was the difference in this game. 20 points from the kicking position. They only had those 2 touchdowns. The rest of those points were all off the foot of Rene Paredes, and he was the difference maker. They got him close enough that he could hit 6 for 6, and look, it's not like they stole this game, but the specialists were the difference for Calgary. We look on BC's side of the ball now, and outside of a really fun second quarter, where Vernon Adams threw 2 touchdown passes, they had a defensive touchdown, times were good in the second quarter. The Lions get utterly fustigated, especially at the line of scrimmage, where the Lions got beat the hell up. They allowed 6 quarterback sacks on Vernon Adams, multiple of those resulting in fumbles, a couple of them resulting in turnovers. The run defense allowing 120 yards rushing on 26 carries with a rush touchdown, 3 opposing runners above 4 yards per carry on the ground. Run defense didn't have it. The pass protection didn't have it. The Lions just didn't have it in week 1. Now, I may be alone in this one because there are still a number of offensive weapons on BC, but the departure of Dominique Rhymes, as well as the departure of Lucky Whitehead, I didn't talk about that last week, but Lucky Whitehead's not on this roster anymore, may have made this pass offense a little too predictable, at the very least in week 1. Now, I don't think they had Keon Hatcher in this game at all, but 23 of Vernon Adams' 33 targets went to the combination of Justin McInnis and Alexander Hollins. That's just too much to only send towards 2 guys. You got to have a little more of an air raid built into your offense where it's not that predictable where the football is going to be going. But this team also still can't run the ball. They tried to 19 times, only generating 60 yards on the ground. That is symptomatic of inferior offensive line play. And that could very well be the biggest part of the storyline for this team through the first part of the season. That O-line has got to figure it out. So let me start by saying this. The upset is absolutely on the table here. Calgary looked good enough in week 1 and BC looked bad enough in week 1 that the upset is on the table here, even though this is like our biggest line of the week. However, I believe, again, I said this earlier, I believe enough in my read on these 2 teams that I'm going to stick with the BC Lions to bounce back. I don't think they put up 2 duds in a row, and if they don't put up another total dud, they're just a better football team, I think, than Calgary is, especially where BC is going to be playing at home. Give me the Lions to get off the schneid here, pick up their first win of the season. BC beats Calgary. Now, like I mentioned, it's the biggest line of the week this week. BC is laying 8 points at home as a favorite against Calgary. I don't see how you can lay these. I don't see how you can watch that BC Lions game and offensive line from last week if you understand where football games are won and lost. I just don't think you can look at that game and go, oh yeah, that's the team I'm going to lay 8 points on. At least not for this week. Give me the Calgary Stampeders plus the 8 points. Again, the upset is on the table here. I don't think we're going to see it, but I think this is going to be a more competitive game than a -8 line would have you indicate. I think the odds makers are off base on this one. So give me the +8 on the Calgary Stampeders. Total in this game set at 50.5. I feel good about this being an over. High scoring games for both of these teams in week 1. Not totally convinced by either of their defenses right now. I think there's a lot of room out there for points. Give me over on the 50.5 point total. I'm going to go like 31-26 for the Lions, and maybe it's a backdoor cover for the Stampeders here late in the fourth quarter. But give me over and give me 31-26 in favor of BC. Lions win, Stamps cover the +8, and give me the over on the points. And the last game we're going to look at this week takes us to the Hammer, where the Ticats are going to play host to the Saskatchewan Roughriders, the Riders on the tail end of back-to-back roadies. And that's where we'll start with Saskatchewan, and it didn't look so hot through the first 3 quarters of this game, kind of looking like some of the problems from seasons past are rearing their ugly heads again, but the Riders reel off a 21-3 run in the fourth quarter. Sean Bain with a hat trick of receiving touchdowns, I think on his birthday, or like right around his birthday, to overcome a pair of interceptions from Trevor Harris. Let's be honest here, the outcome of this game is probably different against most other teams, especially given that the Riders were given the benefit of more than 100 yards of penalty yardage by the Elks on the opposite side. So there's lots here to work on, but I also need to see AJO get unleashed in the pass game. He had 1 target in this game. He carried the ball 19 times. That's great. But he had 1 target in the pass game. And that's just, or 18 times. Anyways, 1 target in the pass game. That's not the AJ Ouellette that we watched these guys deploy last year. It's just not. In Hamilton, James Butler is a force. Stop me if you've heard that before. He touched the ball 14 times for 131 all-purpose yards. And I just don't have it in me to hang this loss on Bo Levi Mitchell. I thought he was decent. 336 all-purpose yards. He did throw a touchdown, did throw a pick. I can't hang that loss on Bo individually. And part of the problem here is I don't really have anybody to hang that loss on. Like, I may just have no answers for this one. Like, maybe I just don't have any answers when it comes to this team. They've kind of fustigated me for multiple seasons now. I'm not out on the Ticats just yet, but I'm kind of hesitant, and they're clearly digging for answers too, based on the fact that they just, I believe yesterday, signed the brother of Tua Tagovailoa, Talia Tagovailoa, at quarterback. So now you've got Bo, you've got Taylor Powell, and now you've got a Tagovailoa in the quarterback room as well. This to me reeks of a team that's looking for answers. And as far as I'm concerned, right from the jump, this was going to be a just take the dog game. Like, this was destined for me. With these 2 teams, neither of which thrill me coming out of week 1, clearly, this was just going to be a, who's the dog? Take the dog. And the dog in this game is the Saskatchewan Roughriders, based on the fact, of course, that this game is in Hamilton. The Ticats come in laying a single point as a very marginal home favorite. I'm going to take Sasky, which means I'm taking both teams that are on the tail end of back-to-back road games, which I don't love, but I think the Riders maybe showed me a little bit more in week 1. These 2 teams are very similar, so it's not going to shock me either way this game goes. You got to pick somebody. That's why we're here. So I'm going to take the Riders in Hamilton to get the win over the Ticats. So obviously I'm going to take the +1 on Saskatchewan. You're going to take that line either way. Total in the game set at 48.5 points. I do think this stays under. And maybe that's a symptom of I'm not really convinced by either one of these offenses outside of James Butler and Sean Bain. Like, each one of these offenses has a nuclear weapon, but it certainly didn't work out for Hamilton in week 1, and it only worked out for Saskatchewan in week 1 because of their nuclear weapon in Sean Bain. I'm going to take the under here. I just don't like, I don't know, something about this number smells fishy to me. I'm going to go like a 24-20 in favor of the Riders. So Riders win, Riders cover the -1, and give me the under on that 48.5 point total. Something about that doesn't smell right. There you go, folks. Those are my picks for Week 2, 2024 CFL season. We'll go over them here with you one more time. I got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers going to Ottawa, beating the Red Blacks 37-17, which means I have the Bombers covering -7 and going over on the 46.5 point total. I got the Montreal Alouettes traveling to Edmonton and beating the Elks 26-17. That's a win for Montreal, a cover on the -5.5 point spread for the Alouettes, and give me the under on the 47.5 point total. I got the BC Lions at home beating the Calgary Stampeders 31-26, which means I am taking +8 on Calgary. So I am hedging my bets there. Give me an over on the 50.5 point total. And I got the Saskatchewan Roughriders traveling to Hamilton, beating the Ticats 24-20, which means I'm taking plus one on the Saskatchewan Roughriders and under on the 48.5 point total. That's the show for you this week, folks. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to stop by and watch. Thank you if you watched the week 1 episode as well. And thank you if you're enjoying this brand new CFL season, like I certainly know I am. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Reminder, my CFL fantasy roster will be in the pinned comment down below once I'm actually able to set it. I would imagine you'll probably see a Bombers stack in there. You might see a Sean Bain in there. Yeah, I might see a BC Lion or two in there. We'll see what happens. That will be down in the pinned comment for you, again, once I'm able to do it. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the games in week 2. We'll see you again next Tuesday.